Welcome everyone to our third Friday legal webinar for the month of October. My name is Sandra Vidrio and I'm representing the team at the Fresno Area Hispanic Foundation. It is a pleasure to have all of you join with us this wonderful Friday afternoon. And if you're watching the recording after, thank you for your participation in the training. The topic for today is going to be focusing on how to hire workers, and that includes an explanation of the difference between employees and contractors. And so we are joined today by the team at New Business Community Law Clinic at Berkeley Law, and our presenter for today is Bill Kell. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started with some welcome remarks before we continue with the legal presentation. If it is your first time attending the Zoom platform, I do want to encourage you to submit your questions throughout the presentation, and we will be having a Q&A session at the end. So you can go ahead and submit your questions using the chat box feature on your computer. And of course, if you're using a tablet or mobile device, select the More option and then select the chat option. And then we also have language interpretation being provided by Lingüística Team. So tenemos la introducción de la presentación de hoy en español, así que si se está conectando virtualmente por Zoom, usted tiene el acceso de poder escuchar la presentación en español. Simplemente accese la opción en su tableta o celular que dice More y asegúrese de seleccionar la opción donde dice Language Interpretation, interpretación del lenguaje, y después selecciona el idioma de español para que pueda escuchar la presentación de hoy. Thank you. And I would now like to transition into giving a recognition to the following companies for the support of our organization and the continuation of these building capacity webinars that are really essential for our startup and existing business owners. So thank you to Bank of America, Comcast, Bank of the West, Bank of the Sierra, Chevron, Donna G. Sales, Union Bank, JP Morgan Chase & Company, and Wells Fargo. Thank you so much for your support and your commitment to our organization. This is the agenda for today. As mentioned, my name is Sandra Vidrio, and I'm the Business Development Officer here at the Fresno Area Hispanic Foundation. And our presenter for today is going to be Bill Kell, who is the Clinic Director at the New Business Community Law Clinic. And we will be ending the presentation with a Q&A session with all participants. I want to take a few seconds, I should say, to share a little bit more about the foundation. Our organization has been here in the community since 2004, and our focus has been in exploring and moving on that mission of supporting our startup business owners and our existing businesses. So we provide technical assistance, and what that is one-on-one business support for someone that is looking to navigate the business plan of creating a business, the permits and licensing process, or perhaps you're an existing business and you're looking to venture into new markets or looking to expand or hire workers, expanding just the sales for your business. So we provide that one-on-one technical assistance support. We provide capacity building workshops, so webinars in the forms of webinars now during these upcoming next months. And so the topics are in legal, finance, marketing, and we also have additional programming in the forms of cohorts for women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs that are starting up their business. And we are also a nationally recognized financial institution. And so we have microloan programs available for startup businesses, existing businesses throughout California. And of course, we just launched a very new program for consumer lending. So we also have a consumer loan program, and our team is here to help you and assist with your business needs, whether you're a startup business, existing business, if you're located in Fresno or surrounding counties here in the area, we're here to help you navigate through your business journey. So for more information, feel free to contact us at 559-222-8705. And you can also visit our website and our social media platforms to keep up to date with upcoming information. With that being said, I don't want to take much more time away from all of you, and I want to introduce you to Bill Kell, who will be doing our presentation for today on the topic of how to hire workers. So Bill, you are now the co-host, and you should be able to share your screen. So thank you so much for joining us today and for your partnership with our organization.
Okay, here we go. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. Yeah, we're ready to jump right into some hiring stuff, and hope you're all doing well today, helping and heading into a nice weekend here. So let me just quickly get to the home page and a slideshow. So what I would say to you folks is definitely think of questions that you might have as we go along, and I would say put those in the chat because I'll just handle those in order as we finish up at the end. And yeah, feel free to ask questions. And of course, if we don't know the immediate answer to it, I'll follow up with you. We also have some template forms that people can use. When I refer to some of them, like an independent contractor agreement or an offer letter for an employee, something like that, I'll make those available through Sandra. Just maybe, Sandra, I think you've got all the emails for people who are participating, right? Maybe. Yeah, what we can do is if you would like some of these templates, we're happy to send those along. So without further ado, let's get started. So hiring, let's start with just first this, of course, little reminder is that, of course, what I'm giving you today is a general overview of legal issues that commonly affect small businesses, and hiring is one of those where it's very easy to get into trouble very quickly. So it's a very important thing we should be covering today. And of course, this isn't a substitute for actually consulting directly with a lawyer, which we always, of course, recommend. All right, well, here's some workshop agenda here. Question, why do people get into trouble when they're trying to hire workers? Why it's also tough for you as you're trying to think of hiring people. It may be that you've already been going for quite some time and now you're realizing you need some more help. Yeah, well, it's tough, and so we're going to acknowledge that at the beginning. But then I want to flag for you that hiring and the kinds of workers that you're going to be hiring are really very simply boiled down to three, what we call the three buckets in the state of California. And there really aren't any hybrid relationships besides these three. So you just got to make sure that you meet the requirements for each one in order to stay out of trouble. And so I'm going to cover each of those. And then I do have a little bit at the end on employing family members, particularly children. So we'll just cover that. And of course, Q&A, we'll cover that at the end. All right. All right, well, one of the first things is, I just want to acknowledge it's tough to hire new people because, you usually start with little cash, lots of uncertainty. I mean, do you want to hire somebody when in 6 months you aren't even sure you're going to be there? You're working without pay. And so that seems a little unfair that you're actually hiring somebody and paying them. And then informal relationships, maybe you have a family member, maybe you have a friend who wants to help you with stuff. So it makes sense that you might want to keep those relationships a little informal. And why do I mean informal? Well, I mean, it's hard to commit if you're not sure where you're going to go money-wise in the future. Lots of paperwork to formalize one of these relationships. And it's kind of difficult to understand the law here. I mean, what has to be an employee? Who has to be hired as an employee versus an independent contractor? Well, we're going to try and clear that up for you a little bit, okay? So here's those three buckets. In contrast to the informal kind of relationships I was just referring to, California and the IRS define workers into three distinct buckets. These are employees, independent contractors, and then this sort of broader category of unpaid workers, which would be interns for the for-profits and volunteers for the nonprofit. And so, as I said, we'll cover all of three of these so you know clearly what's required. But just know that in a default situation, or I should say, if the Employment Development Department of California, which oversees all this, if you are audited by them, if you go to a hearing with them, the main thing to know is that it's a presumption in their mind that a worker is an employee. And so those relationships have the strictest requirements. And so maybe let's start with those a little bit. Oh, I should point out possible risks of keeping these relationships informal. You see, if you keep a relationship, you're not quite sure whether an independent contractor or an employee, well, a few things happen. There'll be some misunderstandings, somebody who leaves who you thought was an independent contractor, you tell them, we can't use your services anymore. they can potentially come back and go, wait a second, I really should have had some unemployment. I can file for unemployment. No, I can't because I was a contractor. Oh, well, I thought I was an employee. And then all they have to do is contact the California Employment Development Department and say, am I eligible for unemployment? And that's where they'll say, well, let's take a look at that. And so yeah, you don't want that to happen. There could be audits by the California Department of Employment or the Department of Industrial Relations. They have hearings, potential fines for misclassifying a worker. But here's another one that's kind of scary right now, and that is that an ex-worker, if they feel that they've been misclassified, they actually have the right now under state law to file a personal lawsuit against an employer, get an attorney to hire a personal lawsuit, to bring a personal lawsuit. So we'll cover that a little bit more later. Don't want to scare you too much, but I will say that under recent independent contractor laws that have been passed, these risks are higher than they have been in previous years. Okay, but we'll get to that when we get to contractors. All right, here you come. Employees, the presumptive category of these workers, okay? Well, these requirements they don't just come from state law, from California law, they have federal law involved and also local law. And what I would say about that is that the employee gets the benefit of the most beneficial of those laws. So for example, I believe there is a federal minimum wage, and then there's a California minimum wage. And then in like San Francisco and Berkeley, there are higher minimum wages. And so they would get a Berkeley employee or Fresno employee will get the employee minimum wage for that particular local jurisdiction, you see. Same thing with other kinds of requirements. It could be Fresno requires a certain level of family leave that's higher than the state. That would also be of benefit to any Fresno employee that's being hired. And here's the bad news is that complying with all of the requirements for employees generally increases the cost of labor by about 30%. So that's one reason that people try and sort of do it on the cheap by doing independent contractors. Maybe you can get away with doing that. We'll tell you what's required to do that. But I wouldn't just jump to it because it's cheaper, because that could be not so cheaper in the long run if this is challenged. Now, here's an important point, and that is California is what's called an employment at will state. That means that it's supposed to be sort of equal power here. The employer or the employee can leave the relationship at any time for any lawful reason. Okay, so an employer, can just say, look, I just really don't like how you dealt with that customer there, you're fired. That can happen if they don't have a contract, if they don't have an employment contract. We'll cover contracted employees versus at will employees. But if you don't have an employment contract, yeah, you're gone. And if you don't do something the employer do something the employer doesn't like. And similarly, the employee can leave at any time. And so one thing you should notice is, for example, let's say the employer says, well, you got to give me a month's notice before you leave. Okay, well, that's not what employment at will is. Employment at will says you can leave at any time. And so if you try and impose this on your employees, well, then you're potentially lifting yourself out of employment at will and creating contractual employment. And in that situation, we'll tell you, basically it's going to be harder to fire somebody in that situation. Okay, well, here's probably the biggest headline in addition to saying that employees are presumed, the presumed category. And that is that I'm going to now show you, this is not for the faint of heart, 17 things that employers have to do. But fortunately, a payroll service will help you keep track of all of this here. And I guess that's the biggest thing I would say about doing employees is, just hire a payroll service, keep track of, unless you love accounting, unless your brother-in-law is doing your accounting for free for you, payroll service is how you keep track of all of these things. And they are also a deductible business expense. So that's really cool. So here are the 17 things that employers must do. I'm not going to go over every single one of them, but I guess what I would say to you is these should probably be familiar to you if you've ever been employed. You know, employer has to start with an EIN, an employer identification number. You have to register. If you just have one employee, you have to register with the California Employment Development Department. Okay. Oh, by the way, I should mention this. This is an important aspect sometimes. People say, well, do I have to register with the EDD if I have a contractor? No. But if you have one employee, then you not only have to register that employee with the EDD, you have to register all of your independent contractors with the EDD. So an employee, first employee means now you have to have all of your contractors registered wherever they are, okay? And same thing with the employees, wherever they are. Now, the main thing with employees, if you have them out of state or something like that, normally you'd also have to register with that state's employment development department, whatever they call it there, okay? All right, so there may be several registrations you got going on at the same time. All right, well, here's some of the, I guess I'll highlight the most important ones I can think of, and that's withholding taxes, withholding state disability insurance payments, adding workers' comp, purchasing a workers' comp insurance, either from the state or from a you could self-insure using an insurance company, okay? Of course, you got to pay state unemployment tax, or there's this reimbursement method, which I would never do, and that would be to say, look, we're not going to join the state unemployment insurance program, but any unemployment costs that we incur, we'll pay for ourselves. Oh gosh, I wouldn't do that. Insurance is so much better, cheaper in the long run for something like that. A few other things, pretty important, federal form I-9. This is keeping track of whether an employee has a right to work. Those you have to fill in, and you have to do it in a, how would I say it, a good faith way. You know, if an employee gives you information, you know, they have to supply proof that they have a right to work in the US. And of course, you have to get this from everyone. It would be discriminatory to ask only the folks of color to do it or something like that. But again, if they give you information that on the face of it looks like there is a right to work here, you don't have to check it further. You know, it may be that later you'll turn out to get a notice from the IRS that says, wait a minute, that social security number isn't right. Then you have to go further, but just sort of a straight, social security card they give you, you don't have to double check that in some fashion. Okay, the other things, I think, well, you can see them here, but these are sort of the main things. I guess I would point out the wage and hour laws. That's the place where people get in trouble the most, I would say, you know, not knowing that you have to pay, for example, 1.5 times your salary if you're overtime, if a person works overtime over 8 hours, and then if they're over 12 hours, then they're actually going to have to be paid double. So these are things, and then having breaks during the day. I'm not going to cover the details of those, but we could if people have questions at the end. And then, of course, health insurance, that's only if you're more than 50 employees. Don't worry about that part. But we do recommend personnel policies if you have them, or we could provide you with an overview of, personnel policy manual or something like that. So these are a lot of things you got to keep track of. Payroll company will help you do that, which is great. Okay, now onboarding employees, here's the thing. To maintain employment at will, this is what I've told you, is you don't want to use an employment contract. You know, generally if you do set up an employment contract, then you can only terminate according to the terms of that contract. If it doesn't say anything in there, well, then generally you have to find cause, justifiable cause to terminate them. And there's lots of court cases and other things you have to think about as to what is for cause. So it gets kind of complicated if you use an employment contract to get rid of somebody. We would recommend only using them for the key employees that you really want to stick around. Sometimes a key employee like a CEO will say, I only want to, I'll only take your offer if you give me an employment contract, you see. So, and again, as I said, don't set up any kind of requirements that make it seem like you have a contract, like that the employee has to give you notice or something like that. All right. Instead, you want to use this thing called an offer letter. Okay, offer letter, just put it on your stationery. This is great. Describe the terms in the letter. How many hours and what they're being paid. And usually at the bottom, then you say, here's a signature line. You sign this to let us know that you've received this and you understand the terms. And then just keep that in the employee's file. It's deemed not to be a contract. Okay, you see. And an important part is I would recommend that you have personnel policies. As I said, we have a personal policy manual that we can share with you, a template, one of those. You probably want to have personal policies that give your workers a sense of things like, yeah, when can I take leave? And do I have privacy in my emails? How can I get reimbursed for stuff? These are questions that there should be standard answers to. That's the thing. Personal policies help you become standard with employees so that they know, for example, they can take time off to take care of their sick family member, but not to take care of their sick animal or something like that. And so what I would say is, oops, sorry, I thought I had this at the bottom. Oh yeah, here it is. Require that in the offer letter, that's where you put in the offer letter, I also have read the personnel policies and agree to them, you see. Okay. All right, well, that's employees. Okay, now we're going into a bigger thicket here. Okay, ready? Independent contractors. This actually used to be a lot simpler, I'll tell you that. But in the last 2 years, particularly because, well, I don't want to put the figure too much, but Uber and Lyft have sort of broken the mold about how you treat independent contractors. The state of California decided in a court case and then also in statute that we need to have some guidelines as to how you treat independent contractors and how people, should be able to have the protections of employment in most circumstances, you see. Okay, well, we'll cover this in just a second. But generally speaking, what is an independent contractor? Think of somebody who is part-time, brought in on an as-needed basis, paid. You could be paid by hours, but you could also be paid by project. It could say, plumber could say, hey, I will unstop your drain for $150, something like that. Yeah, so you bring them in, you pay them $150, they unstop your drain. Then they leave, so they go work for other people. Here you go, that's one. Plumber is an independent business that can serve others. Okay, so these are the expectations of independent contractors. One of the problems with Uber was that they were having people do all their driving, but they weren't working for other people, you see, and that would potentially leave them subject to being exploited more for their labor than if they, were more like a limo driver who could work for other people, you see. Again, the independent contractor generally supposed to provide their own supplies. They're supposed to not need any training from you. Yeah, generally that's what an independent contractor should look like. I always think of like either a plumber or I think of like a website designer. Okay, either one of those is a pretty typical thing. You don't have to have one on your staff all the time, and you can bring them in to give you a website or unplug your drain, and then they go out and do stuff for other people. That's the general sense of what an independent contractor should be. And as I said, it used to be pretty simple what an independent contractor is. It used to be this thing called the Borello test would determine it. It's from a case called Borello versus Department of Industrial Relations. So it used to be that you'd think, well, all I have to do is not control this contractor very much. And as in those examples of the website designer and the plumber, you think, okay, plumber just, okay, well, where's the drain? Okay, it's over here. All right, that's not controlling them very much. Okay, website designer, what do you need on your website? I need this, this, and this, and this. Okay, and I need it by, October 30th. Okay, I got it. And then they go ahead and do it. You see, that's not too much control for just telling them what you need. Okay. All right, now, I should say, there were a few other things that went with this control test. Just so you know, and why am I telling you about this control test is some of it is still here. And I'll tell you about this in just a second. But some of this is still good law here, okay? So if a court were looking at a worker and the worker says, no, I should have been paid as an employee, this is where you might be able to say, okay, but no. Under the Borello test, let me see. Here you go. We are doing a new business. We are developing a prototype. We don't have any sales yet, all right? But we need somebody to come in and develop the prototype for us, okay? And let's pretend that the person who is developing the prototype says, well, I should have been an employee in this situation. You should pay me as an employee. This is where you'd say, but we're not, developing this prototype is not the regular part of our business. No, we just need to develop that prototype, and then we go out and mass produce it and sell it. So I think this would be a factor that you could argue is, look, we brought this person in to do something that is not normally what we do, okay? Similarly, we had a business at one time who was doing interpretation, okay? And what we said to them was, well, look, if you put on your website, we do Spanish, French and Tagalog or something like that. And then you had somebody come along, was speaking Hindi, that's where you might say, well, that's not going to be a regular part of our services. We could hire somebody who speaks Hindi just for this one thing, you see. So why am I telling you this is these are factors that will help you if there was any kind of dispute, or if you're trying to figure out, does this person meet this control test? Can I hire this person without controlling them very much? Okay. The degree of permanence of the relationship, there you go. How long the services are to be performed. Now this part about whether the parties believe they are creating an employer-employee relationship, that's really sort of up in the air. A lot of people can interpret different things. All right, so why am I telling you this? Well, here came along in the last 2 years, something called AB5 and AB 2257, which superseded AB5. Okay, so this is now setting up a real state definition of what an independent contractor is. And this is the prevailing law now about whether you can hire somebody as a contractor or not. It's something called the ABC test, which I'll show you in just a second here. But generally the idea is this new ABC test that you have to think about not only has the control test in it, not only has the test in it that says that contractors need to be sort of in the business for themselves and working for others. Well, here's the test right here. But it also adds this other factor here too, which is kind of important. The worker cannot perform the usual regular continuous services of the business or the usual course of the business here. So that's another, when you think of this test, think of Uber. And I guess I would say, think of how Uber is not following hardly any of this. Sorry. Okay. So the first one is free from the hiring entity's control. Okay. Well, that's the Borello test we were just talking about. And, Uber, how much control they do on their drivers? Well, geez, you have to use our app. You have to charge our rates. You have to go where we tell you to go. I mean, there's a lot of control there, I guess I would say. But the second one, this is what it has been referred to, by the way, as the killer bee for Uber, because it's B on the ABC test. But anyway, the people who are working for you doing the regular and continuous services that you're providing should generally be employees. You're a daycare center. Your daycare center teachers should be employees, right? I mean, you're a bakery. Your employer is doing the baking. Employees doing baking should be employees, right? This is a factor that is going to trip up a lot of people, all right? And then finally, this thing of independent contractors need to be in business for themselves. Well, there's a few indications of that. Do they work for other people? Are they formed as a separate business, like an LLC or something? Do they have a website that says we work for others? These are the kinds of things you need to think about before you hire, rather than just that first one, the control test, the Borello test here, okay? So much more complicated to figure out whether you're a contractor or not. And by the way, if you are yourself a contractor, you may have already encountered people sort of saying, well, wait a minute, can I really hire you? Can you meet this 3-part test? Yeah, so this is a problem for people who are contractors and trying to do a business. Okay, now fortunately, there are some exemptions that came along with this law. So if you fall into any of these categories, I'm going to try and give you, I mean, there's all kinds of categories in people workers. And so I'm just trying to give you sort of the most common ones here. But you know, if you're wondering about whether you are in an exempt category, you can probably look it up under the state law. But you know, you can check with us if you have a question on that. So look at this right away. Okay, you got doctors, you got lawyers, you got engineers, you got translators. There you go. You've got accountants, you've got landscape architects, you got musicians. All of these folks here are exempt from the ABC test, but as I said, they do have to meet the Borello test. So for example, you hire your accountant. Okay, you can't tell your accountant to come to your office every single day, work 8 hours a day, sit at this desk, only use your, you know, wear a uniform or something like that. No, you have to employ your accountant, and they need to do their accounting services basically on their own time and using their own materials and stuff like that, you see? So to harken back to that Borello test, if you are in one of these lucky categories that is, you know, freed up from the total ABC test. Now here's another one, professional service workers. These are folks who may have a license. Oh, by the way, with all these folks, if they need a license, of course, they need to get their license too. But here's professional service workers, travel agents, fine artists, bunch of different, you know, photographers, writers. Again, they need to pass this Borello test, but they have a few other little things they have to do here. You know, they have to be able to negotiate their own rates. They need to be able to set their own hours. They customarily, you know, exercise discretion in what they're doing. So the writers will have discretion in what they write. The photographers will have discretion in what they photograph, that sort of thing. Okay, another set of exceptions. Here's another one, licensed barbers, manicurists, cosmetologists, estheticians. These folks, again, exempt from the ABC test, but they still have to meet that Borello test. So again, like a salon can't say, okay, you're going to come in here and cut hair. You have to wear our uniform. You can only come, you have to come at these hours. You got to use that chair. You got to use our agreement. You know, again, these are folks that are kind of like independent, as I said, they have their own sort of business. And so they set their own rates. They use their own book of scheduling appointments, things like that. Okay. So the employer in this situation gives them a form 1099, which is the form you use with an independent contractor. If the employer, let's say the salon collected all the fees and then gave out the share for this particular barber or this particular cosmetologist. Should note that manicurists, the ABC test is going to start applying to them in 2022. So, you know, watch out. Okay, here's another one. Now, this is a very important one, the business to business relationship. Why is this important? Because this is a way that you could lift yourself out of AB5, AB 2257's ABC test if you create a business that provides any of these services. So let's say you're a landscape architect. Well, you're already lifted out of that. Let me see another one. Okay, you're not a landscape architect, but you're a landscaper. Okay, so you don't design. So Regina, yeah, just put your question in the chat if you would there, that'd be good. So let's say you're just a landscaper, I shouldn't say just, but you're a landscaper. You don't do any design work, you come and do the landscaping for people, okay. Normally you would be subject to the ABC test, but if you form a business, a landscaping business, like create an LLC that then contains your business, well, then you are a business to business contractor, okay? So if you then got your landscaping business, then you can be hired like by a bank because that's a business, and then they can hire you this way. You're no longer subject to the ABC test, you see. And what's particularly important to this is that an LLC you can form a single member LLC. So a single landscaper could do this and be in a business to business relationship with another business, even if it's just that single person. And why is that also important for folks who may not have right to work in the US? Well, it means that if you form an LLC, that is creating for yourself a profit-making vehicle, not a salary earning vehicle. Okay, there's a distinction here. So if you have an LLC, let's say this landscaper is working for the bank in a business to business capacity. Okay, the LLC, the income coming into the LLC, that's not wages to the LLC owner, the single LLC member. Those are profits. Okay, so it's important to distinguish that as to right to work. Is if you form that LLC, and normally when forming an LLC, you have to do an operating agreement. Again, this is something we can give you. Okay, you form your LLC by registering at the state level. Then you have this operating agreement that sets out how you handle the profits and whether you have to contribute stuff to the business and other stuff like that, how you manage the decisions of the business. But in that operating agreement, you need to say every distribution of money to me is a profit sharing arrangement. It's really important to not say I earn a salary and I have wages of this much per week. No. You have to say I earn profits from this business. And in that way, that lifts you out of the requirement to have right to work. So it's a very important vehicle for folks, particularly who are undocumented. So as I said, business to business contracting is a way to lift yourself out of the ABC test. There is one important little part here that I should note though, and that's why I said, okay, this thing about the bank. Okay, you could work to a business to business relationship, but here's an important part. You can't provide services directly to the contracting business. What does that mean? Well, here's an example. We were asked this once by a bakery. A bakery said to us, well, couldn't we just hire a company that would then provide delivery services to all the places where they don't get our baked goods? Well, yes, that is a business to business contracting relationship. But in this situation, it would be difficult to set it up for that kind of delivery services. Why? Because they would be providing services directly to the customers of the contracting business. Okay. Now you may be able to finagle this to sort of say, well, it's really providing services to the bakery, not the individual customers of the bakery, you see. But that's an important distinction that you have to pay attention to when you're doing this business to business relationship. And we can help you figure that out if you have any questions. Construction industry subcontractors, yes, those are exempt for the ABC test too. They also have to pass this Borello test. So again, you're hiring a construction contractor or subcontractor. Yeah, you can't say you got to get in 9 to 5, do it this way, do it that way. Again, there has to be some freedom to simply, do the job as they think is best. Okay, they have to control how the work is performed. They usually have to have a license from the contractor state license board. Okay, well, I didn't go through every single one of the exemptions, but those give you a sense of what they are. Now, here's these risks that I tried to give you a sense of. Don't want to scare you too much, but what I'd say to you is that this new law, AB 2257, 1985, gives them, it used to be the Employment Development Department used to be able to audit things, and the Labor Commissioner's Office too, and the Franchise Tax Board used to be able to audit these things. But now individuals can bring private lawsuits if they feel they have been misclassified and get attorney's fees for it. And these are claims that could go back to a 4-year period if you misclassified somebody 4 years ago. And here's a kicker, is the state court the Supreme Court that actually first passed the ABC test, or recognized the ABC test in California, it was called Dynamex, that then led to this new law, AB 2257, said this was always the standard. The ABC test was always the standard. Well, a lot of people don't think so, but what I'm saying to you is, yes, we are looking back now, And because the California Supreme Court said this has always been the test, then that means potentially misclassifications can come back to haunt you 4 years later. All right, so that's pretty scary. That's pretty scary. And I will say, to put a cherry on top of the scare, I have been talking with some of my employment lawyer friends, and they said, you know what? You can look forward in the next little while to ads coming on your TV set late at night. You know, those ones that say, hey, did you take mesothelioma or whatever this is? You might be eligible for some money. Well, there's going to be ads like that for this. There's going to be ads saying, did you work for somebody? Do you think you should have been paid as an employee? Do you think you're out wages that you have owed? Well, contact us. So I guess the overall thing to say is be careful with the contractors. It's hard to figure out, but what we're trying to do here is give you the best information that we can on this. So, okay, well, how do we onboard independent contractors? By the way, we have a nice template we can share with you if you'd like, but overall, make sure it's a written contract. And here are some key terms to include, okay? A description of the project or services that are being provided, of course, and the payment terms, how much and when you're going to pay it, of course. Contractor must have all required licenses and permits, okay? Insurance is usually required, a good thing to make sure that, you know, they have something if there's a lawsuit to cover, you know, the damages that happen. And here's a really important one is any inventions that they make, any copyrighted content. So like that photographer that they took pictures for you, the writer who wrote something for you, all of those things need to be assigned to the employer in writing, okay? Now, why am I saying this thing at the end here, work for hire? What's the thing about that? Well, many people try and put these agreements together, but they'll use this terminology that they may have heard on the news or in lawyer shows. Well, this is a work for hire because we hired you to take these pictures or we hired you to write this stuff. Okay, don't put that in there because there was a judge in California that said, oh, work for hire. Hey, you know, that's an employment concept. You know, there is this work for hire doctrine that an employee, you know, anything an employee does is automatically the employer's. So you don't even have to put it in an agreement, but many employers do. They say, oh, you're going to be a photographer for us. You're going to be a writer for us. It's automatic that whatever they do as an employee belongs to the employer. That's not the case with a contractor. Contractors, you have to actually say, like that website designer, I am giving you the website and the content. Otherwise, it's just a license to use the stuff. Right? But if you say work for hire, this judge made it a problem for everybody because he said, oh, well, this must be an employment relationship then. So if you put this in your written contract with an independent contractor, it can convert it into an employment relationship. And then you have to follow all those 17 things, scary things I was telling you about. Yeah. Okay, so here's just a little overview of, you know, pros and cons of each of these here. You know, again, if you can meet the terms of the ABC test or you're an exempt person from the ABC test, it's going to be cheaper to use an independent contractor. But again, there's that risk of misclassification you got to worry about, and you can't control them very much, right? But an employee, if you want to control them, yeah, make them an employee. And again, all of their stuff that they do for you is going to belong to you all automatically. Those are some good things. So anyway, these are some pros and cons to think about. All right, we're in the final stretch here, folks. Let's see how we're doing. Okay, yeah, I think I finished in about 5 minutes. Unpaid workers. Okay, generally the idea is if you're not a nonprofit, don't do it. Okay, what do I mean by this? Okay, there's always risk in taking on unpaid workers. There's always the potential of misunderstandings. Oh, friend of yours. Oh, I see you're starting your business. You know, do you need somebody to answer the phones? Because, you know, I got some time. I could do that. You know, I could do that from my home. Just route the calls to me. And sure, I'll take care of that for you. They may be thinking to themselves, gee, this is a new company. Maybe they need somebody to hire in the future. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I'll do that. And then eventually they don't get hired. Okay. Then you've got a problem because somebody has worked for you and you haven't paid them. And even though there was an agreement between you not to pay, well, sorry, in the state of California, unpaid workers are generally required to be paid minimum wage at least, okay? And then an unpaid worker, yeah, somebody comes in and says, oh, I'll help you on this housing job you're doing. I know how to pound nails and things like that. Okay, well, what if they get hurt? Then they don't have workers' comp. They don't have any kind of insurance in that situation. And then, of course, this lack of clarity about who owns something, if they're writing for you or photographing something for you, for free. There's just some things you'd think about. Okay. So for nonprofits, I guess the main thing I'd say is, yeah, nonprofits, sure. Volunteers being used all the time, not very regulated. We would suggest that you spell out some of the terms in a contract. So when I get to onboarding in a second, I'll cover what that should be. But unpaid workers that are for-profits, ooh, these are regulated pretty stiffly in the state of California. So you have to, I guess the bottom line for them is you have to treat it as though they are in school with you. So you have to do some kind of training that you would get, that you would do normally in a school. They can't displace regular employees, okay? You can't actually immediately get an advantage from them. You more often by an intern, you have to take time to deal with them, to explain things to them, to set aside time and space for them. Yeah, they're supposed to be kind of a bother, okay? But here's an important point. They need to understand in writing that they're not entitled to wages and that they're not entitled to a job at the end of all this. Okay, well, if you can set all that up in a written agreement, then yeah, you could do an unpaid internship. Here's some stuff on onboarding here. I'd still say a written agreement, strongly recommended. A few things to include: that clearly there's no expectation of payment or a job afterward. Yes. You might want to disclaim liability. Yeah, they come in and they're learning something. They're at your daycare center and they get COVID or something. Well, you might want to have a disclaimer in there that you're not liable for that. Here you go. For volunteers or interns, you might have publications that you want to put them in to give them some kudos. Okay, well, just make sure you have the right to use their image. And then, of course, this invention assignment, copyright assignment. Again, if you don't put this in, there's no expectation that what they do is going to be yours. And don't say work for hire. Okay, remember that. All right, so but for interns, yeah, here's the recommendation. It's easier to show that you've had this sort of training relationship with them if like they're earning community college credit for you, with you. So actually my son did this. He was working for the Miami Hurricanes down in Miami, the college there. And they were actually required him to take some college courses and get credit for some of the work that he was doing. Okay, so that created a record that looked more like there was a training going on. But again, generally following all those requirements I just showed you, interns are supposed to be more trouble than they're worth. All right, last thing I thought I'd cover a little bit is about employing family. There is some good information from the California Employment Development Department on this, but I should point out that employment under the EDD guidelines does not include service performed by a child under the age of 18 in the employ of their father or mother, or a service that's performed by an individual in the employ of a son or daughter or spouse, okay? It includes children who are adopted, but what you should know is that as soon as the child reaches their 18th birthday, this exclusion does no longer apply. It doesn't include stepchildren, doesn't include foster children, sons-in-law, daughters-in-law, okay? There is this thing, there's federal law on employing family too, okay? You should know that this exception does apply even if the minor is married or living with the parents or independently self-employed. That's the California rules. Federal rules would say that if the minor is married, living with the parents, or independently self-supporting, then no, that is employment. You see. And then, of course, the question is, well, do you have to do taxes with them? Okay, well, here's a couple of advantages. You don't have to do the Social Security taxes, they're called FICA. You don't need to pay those for your children under the age of 18 if they're working for you. Normally, with your employees, you'd be having to pay this 7.45 tax on behalf of your employees. Similarly, there's unemployment taxes, that's what's called FUTA. You don't need to be paid for children under the age of 21 or for your spouse or for your parents who are working in your business. And of course, you don't have to withhold their portion of FICA or FUTA taxes either going forward. Okay, one thing I didn't cover here, which is kind of important is, yeah, you do have to observe child labor requirements, and that would have things to say about, well, what kinds of activities can young people, your children do? Can they operate heavy machinery? Can they work full time? The normal thing you know about that is that the schools, your child's school will be an arbiter of this, meaning you have to check with them if they're being employed. They will tell you how many hours they can do. Normally, they would also tell you what kind of tasks they could do, like, again, not operating heavy machinery or doing, like risky medical stuff or stuff like that. But I didn't include that on here, but that stuff is the guidelines on that are readily available from the Employment Development Department. All right, well, that's pretty much what I got. So let's start thinking of questions. Ooh, looks like lots of questions. So let's stop the share for a minute and get right to those questions. Get the chat up here. Here we go. Oh, such nice pictures. Oh, I love the doggy there. Let's see. All right, let's get started here.
Yeah, so one of the questions, which, by the way, thank you, Bill, for this wonderful presentation for today. And I want to clarify to participants that the recording will be made available and it will be posted on our YouTube account for the foundation. So I shared the link on the chat box here. And the first question that we have here is regarding an LLC business. So as a project manager, can I provide private security by subcontracting a security firm, or do I have to hold a security license?
Oh, yes, we could do it. Actually, I see one before that, don't I, about QuickBooks?
There's
a QuickBooks question there. Well, here, I'll do that in order. So QuickBooks, yeah, a lot of people do QuickBooks. I don't know if they keep track of all those 17 things, though. I would worry about that. Maybe, Sandra, you know that. But I have heard people doing QuickBooks for their accounting, but yeah, just remember there are more requirements than simply keeping track of the money going forward. I don't know, Sandra, you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's the same situation where it's because I feel like it's more like having some type of human resource plan, right, in place with the business. So QuickBooks, yeah, you could do, the compliance part, right, like the payroll reporting, things like that. But there's still that human connection where like having that in-house or having some type of familiarity with the legal, the current laws say.
Yeah, because payroll companies would have things like, yeah, well, what about what am I entitled to in terms of family leave or something like that? The payroll offices would be able to tell you that, as opposed to QuickBooks, who wouldn't, just managing the money. Yeah. Okay, here's another one. What if I want to, so I'll get to that security thing in just a sec. What if I want to employ different people for one-day jobs, not hire them on an ongoing basis just for projects, and they're not contractors, rather individuals? Well, remember, there's just the buckets that you have there. I would say that probably what you want to look at here is contractor. However, it depends on what they're doing for you. So for example, yeah, if you were a daycare center, no, you couldn't hire a person for a one-day job because, well, you could hire them as an employee for a one-day job because if your regular and continuous services, they're filling in for somebody. Yeah, I'm sorry, if you're a teacher for a daycare center, you can be hired as a substitute teacher, but generally that has to be as a temporary employee. So again, if it meets the ABC test, yeah, you could do an individual contracting arrangement. Just go back to the ABC test. Can't control them much, can't provide those continuous services of your business, and they have to be able to work for others. Can't just take somebody who's not working for anybody else or able to work or advertising that they're not working for anybody. Okay. All right, keep going down. What's the next one? Project manager with the LLC. Here we go. Can I provide private security by subcontracting a security firm, or do I have to hold a security license? This one is more of a licensure question, I guess. And I'm not sure what the private security licensure laws would be, but I guess I would say, just looking at it, if the security firm that you're subcontracting with has the required licenses, I think so, except there is that exception in business to business exception, remember, about, if you're providing private security, let's say for a bank, well, that would work because of the private security. That would be a B2B relationship. That would be okay. But let's say you were doing a private security for an individual. Okay, that might be an issue, because if you hired somebody else to do it, then they would be providing services not just to you as a business, they would be providing services to your customer who's a single person. So you see, that could be an issue under the ABC test. And the licensure issue, I guess I would just say, yeah, double check with the state licensing board on that one. Usually you find the licenses that people have to have in what's called the Business and Professions Code of the state of California. So that usually lists all of the professions that have to have licenses going forward. Okay. Now, here's an important point on the licensure part. Sometimes you will have, well, here's a good example. Like, we had an interpreter business and they provided interpretation services for a court. Okay. So the court itself required a certification that the person was trained in Spanish or whatever. Okay. So that's different than a license, though, because it's simply a standard that an employer sets forth. You got to be certified as this or that or something like that under their standards. But a license is something that the state gives you after having like passed a test or gone to law school if you're a lawyer or something like that. So, so just know that if you are requiring a license, check again the Business and Profession Code as to whether you need one of those. All right, were there any other questions? Let's see. As a project manager, oh no, I already looked at that one. Phone will die, please answer it anyhow, and I will seek the answer in the replay. Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll just come back, Regina. That should, oh, that was your question about the security thing, right? Okay, but if you have additional questions, yeah, let me just go back to my share screen thing. This is our, oh, too bad. I was gonna say, Sandra, if you could give me back, I could just put up here, well, I'll put it in the chat. Here we go. Let me put it in the chat. Just I wanted to put in our website where you can sign up for office hours. So that would be www.law.berkeley.edu/NBCLC. So if you want to go to that, oh yeah, and then, well, the last slide had that. But anyway, you can see it right here in the chat. This is where you can sign up for regular office hours, Monday and Wednesdays, 11 to 2 p.m. And we can give you a free 45-minute consultation there, or come back to another, third Friday session and ask your questions there. That's good too.
Yeah, I do have a question. Sorry, Sandra, this is Carmina.
Okay, one more. Mm-hmm.
Hi. Okay, so we just started our agriculture business. We are just got our license as independent contractors, and also we ran agricultural ag supplies. We already have an LLC, but there's like so many things that as a first-time business owner, I don't understand or know if we are doing everything that LLC is requiring of us, or if we are following the right process. Do you guys give consultations just to check that out and see and provide?
Yeah, Carmina, probably would be good to have you sign up for an office hour, because we can go through those requirements with you. Yeah, just go ahead and use that link there to sign up for office hours. We can do that any Monday or Wednesday between 11 and 2. And we probably, it's probably better to go through that with more detail than we can here. So, but happy to work with you on that, really.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, folks. Well, I got to start an office hour that's starting at 2 o'clock. So, and I guess what I would say is, if you have additional questions, go ahead and sign up for those office hours, or I can also give you, let me give you, not my email, but this is a sort of clinic email here. And that's new business law at berkeley.edu. So if you use that, you can email me directly, or you can sign up for those office hours there. Yeah.
Thank you so much,
great,
Bill.
Sandra. Glad you put up the new the overview of what we're doing in future workshops. Yes.
Yes, that's correct. I know we had a conversation about having a follow-up workshop on November 19th, talking about a legal checklist for consultants. So of course, like you mentioned, this is consultants, whether they're in the catering business, right? As well as private consulting, engineers. If you're an independent contractor, you're providing consultations, this is a great workshop for you. And then we're going to wrap up the year with a great workshop on demystifying contracts. So start of new year, there's a lot of businesses looking to move into a new location or finally getting that storefront business. So this is a really great topic. So thank you so much, Bill, for the time today. And then here on the screen, you can see the website for Berkeley New Business Community Law Clinic. That way you can check out their office hours to schedule one-on-one consultation. And of course, today's recording will be sent out to everyone that registered in advance. And you can always check out our YouTube account to see previous recordings of other legal webinars. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to seeing you in our next workshop next month.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.